The lights on Galactic Station Velar 9 never truly went dark. They simply changed from bright white to a soft blue, telling everyone that the artificial night had begun. But tonight, the royal wing burned with activity. Guards stood at every door. Servants ran through the halls with worried faces. Something was very wrong. Queen Vela stood at the window of her daughter's room, looking out at the endless stars. She was tall, nearly 8 feet, with smooth gray skin that held a faint shimmer. Her species, the Orani, were among the oldest in the known galaxy. They had built empires when humans were still living in caves. They had conquered worlds, created technologies beyond imagination, and ruled with cold, perfect logic. But none of that power could help her now. Behind her, Princess Lyra lay on a floating bed, her eyes half closed. The young Orani was barely 400 years old, still a child by their standards. Her skin, once a beautiful silver, had turned pale and dull. The golden markings that ran along her arms and face, the signs of royal blood, had faded to an ugly gray. She looked like a dying flower. 14 days, Queen Vela said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. 14 days without food. High Physician Torek stood nearby, his long fingers wrapped around a tablet that showed medical readings. He was old, even for an Orani, and his face was full of worry lines. Your Majesty, I have tried everything. We have brought nectar from 12 different regions of the homeworld. We have adjusted the chemical balance. We have even tried adding flavoring compounds, though such things are considered beneath proper Orani nutrition. And nothing works, the Queen said. It was not a question. The princess simply refuses. She looks at the food and she turns away. Torek lowered his head. I fear it may be the fatting. The Queen's eyes flashed with something that might have been fear, quickly hidden behind her cold mask. The fatting was a condition that sometimes struck young Orani. They lost all desire to eat, to live, to exist. No one knew why it happened. No one knew how to cure it. Those who suffered from it simply grew weaker and weaker until they became empty shells. That is not possible, Queen Vela said firmly. My daughter is strong. She is the heir to the greatest empire in the galaxy. She does not have the fatting. Torek said nothing. There was nothing to say. On the bed, Lyra opened her eyes slightly. She had heard everything, as she always did. Her mother thought she was sleeping, but sleep had become difficult. Everything had become difficult. She did not understand what was wrong with her. She only knew that when the servants brought her the nectar, her body rejected it completely. Not just her stomach, but something deeper. Something in her soul said no. She had tried to explain this to Torek, but he had not listened. He had run more tests, given her more medicine, and told her to try harder. Her mother had commanded her to eat, using the cold voice of a queen rather than the warm voice of a mother. Neither approach had worked. Lyra turned her head to look at the stars through the window. She wondered what it felt like to simply float away into that darkness. Would it be peaceful? Would it be better than this strange emptiness inside her? Far below the royal wing, in the lowest levels of the station, Park Jinho pushed his cleaning cart through a narrow corridor. The wheels squeaked with every turn, a sound that had become familiar to him over the past 3 years. His uniform was simple gray, marked with the symbol that identified him as maintenance staff. In the hierarchy of the station, janitors ranked just above the machines that recycled waste. Jinho was 34 years old, though he looked older. His hair was already showing streaks of gray, and there were tired lines around his eyes. Life had not been easy since he left Earth. The war had taken his home, his restaurant, and most of his family. He had escaped on a refugee ship and eventually found work on Velar 9, doing the jobs that no other species wanted to do. He did not complain. Complaining required energy, and Jinho preferred to save his energy for things that mattered. As he cleaned, he listened. That was one thing he had learned in his years on the station. Aliens often spoke freely around humans, treating them like furniture. They said things they would never say if they thought anyone important was listening. Jinho had learned more about galactic politics from mopping floors than most diplomats learned in meetings. Tonight, two Orani guards stood near a door, speaking in low voices. They did not notice the human janitor working nearby. Why would they? He was invisible to them. "The princess is dying," one guard said. "I heard Torek tell the queen." "The fatting?" the other guard asked. "They think so. She has not eaten in 2 weeks. Her light is almost gone." The first guard made a sound of disgust. "Weak. Just like those humans and their endless emotions. The princess has always been too soft." "Careful," the second guard warned. "She is still the heir." "For how long? If she dies, the succession falls to General Korath. He would make a stronger ruler anyway." Jinho kept his head down and continued mopping. His face showed nothing, but his mind was working. A princess who would not eat, doctors who could not help, a mother who was watching her child die. He thought about his own mother, back on Earth. He thought about the way she used to make soup when he was sick, singing old songs while she cooked. He thought about his grandmother, who believed that food could heal anything if it was made with enough love. Those memories felt very far away now. Later that night, Jinho sat in his small room in the workers' quarters. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a tiny cooking station, but he had made it his own. A few pictures hung on the wall, showing places on Earth that no longer existed. A small pot sat on the heating element, filling the room with the smell of rice and vegetables. He ate alone, as he always did, but as he chewed, he kept thinking about what the guards had said. A princess who would not eat. It seemed strange to him. In his experience, people who refused food were not simply being difficult. They were trying to say something that words could not express. But who was he to think about such things? He was just a janitor. The Orani were ancient and wise. They had physicians who understood medicine far beyond anything humans had ever discovered. What could a human possibly offer that they could not provide themselves? Jinho finished his meal and washed his dishes carefully. He prepared his uniform for the next day. He lay down on his bed and closed his eyes. But sleep did not come easily. Something was bothering him, like a small stone in his shoe. He could not name it, but he could feel it. A sense that something needed to be done, and that he was the only one who could do it. It was a foolish feeling. Dangerous, even. Getting involved in royal affairs was the fastest way for a human to disappear on this station. But the feeling would not go away. In the royal wing, Princess Lyra lay awake as well, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. Another day had passed, another day without food. Her body was growing weaker, but she almost welcomed the weakness. At least it was something to feel. She did not know that far below her, a human janitor was thinking about her. She did not know that the universe was about to connect them in the strangest possible way. She only knew that she was tired and empty and waiting for something she could not name. The stars continued to shine outside her window, cold and distant and eternal, and the station continued its slow rotation through the void, carrying all its passengers toward whatever destiny awaited them. Park Jinho had learned to cook before he learned to read. His grandmother had placed a wooden spoon in his hand when he was 4 years old and told him that food was the most important thing in the universe. Not money, not power, not fame. Food. Because food was love made visible, she said. Food was memory you could taste. He had not understood her then. He was just a child who liked the way vegetables sizzled in hot oil. But as he grew older, he began to see what she meant. When his father died, his mother made his favorite soup every night for a month. She never said she loved him during that time, but the soup said it for her. When his first restaurant failed, his grandmother sent him a package of dried fish and rice cakes from her village. No letter, just food. And somehow, that was enough. Now, standing in the lower medical bay of Velar 9, Jinho thought about those lessons. Kang Sara, the human medic who worked in this forgotten corner of the station, was telling him about the Orani princess. "She is dying," Sara said, shaking her head. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and quick hands, the kind of person who noticed everything. She and Jinho had become friends over the years, mostly because they were two of the only humans on the station who had not lost themselves to despair. 15 days now without food. The whole royal wing is in chaos. I heard the guards talking, Jinho said quietly. They say it is the fatting. That is what the Orani call it when they do not understand something. Sora leaned against her desk, crossing her arms. Their medicine is advanced, but their psychology is primitive. They treat emotions like diseases to be cured, not signals to be understood. Jinho nodded slowly. He had seen this many times among alien species. They could travel between stars and live for thousands of years, but they often understood their own hearts less than a human child. Has anyone asked her why she will not eat? He asked. Sora laughed, but there was no humor in it. The Orani do not ask their children questions. They give commands and expect obedience. Queen Vela probably ordered her daughter to eat 100 times, and when the princess did not obey, they assumed something was broken in her body. Maybe something is broken, Jinho said, but not in her body. Sora looked at him with curious eyes. What are you thinking, Jinho? He did not answer right away. He was thinking about his own dark times after the war, when he had lost everything and everyone he loved. There had been weeks when he could not eat, no matter how hungry his body was. The food had no taste. It brought no comfort. It was just dead matter that he had to force down his throat. What had saved him was not medicine or therapy. It was an old woman on the refugee ship who had shared her last packet of instant noodles with him. She had told him about her grandchildren, her garden, her husband who had died 20 years ago. She had made the noodles feel like a gift instead of just fuel. And somehow, that small connection had been enough to pull him back from the edge. I am thinking, Jinho said finally, that maybe the princess needs something the Orani cannot give her. And what is that? I do not know yet. That night Jinho made a decision that could cost him his life. He used his maintenance clearance to access the upper levels of the station. As a janitor, he was allowed in almost every corridor as long as he had a reasonable excuse. A broken light, a spilled drink, a malfunctioning air vent. The station's security systems were designed to watch for threats, not for cleaning staff. He made his way to the restricted corridor outside the princess's chamber. Guards stood at the main entrance, but there was a side passage that led to a small alcove near the door. It was a place where servants waited when they were called. Tonight, it was empty. Jinho sat down on the floor, his back against the cold metal wall. He had brought his dinner with him in a small container. It was nothing special, just kimchi fried rice made from whatever ingredients he could find in the station's human food supply. But he had made it with care, the way his grandmother had taught him. The rice was perfectly cooked, each grain separate but soft. The vegetables were cut into small, even pieces. The egg on top was fried just until the edges were crispy, but the yolk was still soft. He opened the container and began to eat. The smell rose into the air, warm and complex. Garlic, sesame, the sharp tang of fermented cabbage, the richness of the egg. It was a smell that did not belong in this sterile corridor, among these cold metal walls and humming machines. Jinho ate slowly, savoring each bite. He was not thinking about the princess. He was thinking about home, about his mother's kitchen on a Sunday morning, about the small restaurant he had owned in Seoul where regular customers became like family, about all the meals he had shared with people he loved, people who were now gone. He did not notice the door to the princess's chamber slide open. Princess Lyra had been lying in bed, staring at nothing, when the smell reached her. At first, she thought she was imagining it. The Orani sense of smell was not as strong as some species, but it was still better than humans. And this smell was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was not the clean, efficient smell of Orani nectar. Nectar smelled like nothing, really. It was designed that way, optimized for nutrition without any distracting sensory elements. This smell was different. It was messy and complicated and alive. Without thinking, Lyra got out of bed. Her legs were weak from days of lying still, but the smell pulled her forward like a rope. She walked to the door and pressed the panel to open it. The human was sitting on the floor a few meters away, eating from a metal container. He looked up when the door opened, and his eyes went wide with surprise. For a long moment they simply stared at each other. The ancient princess of a galactic empire and the human janitor from a destroyed planet. They could not have been more different. And yet, something passed between them in that moment. A recognition of some kind. A sense that they were both, in their own ways, very alone. "What is that?" Lyra asked. Her voice was rough from disuse. Jinho recovered from his surprise and gave a small bow, still sitting. "Food, Your Highness." "I know it is food." Lyra took a step closer, her eyes fixed on the container. "But what kind of food? It smells like. She did not have words for what it smelled like. She had never experienced anything to compare it to. "It is called kimchi fried rice," Jinho said. "It is a human dish. Very simple, just rice, vegetables, and an egg." "It does not smell simple." Jinho smiled slightly. "Maybe simple is not the right word. It is humble, made from common things, but common things can be meaningful." Lyra sat down across from him, ignoring every rule of protocol she had ever been taught. Princesses did not sit on floors. Princesses did not speak to servants. Princesses certainly did not show interest in alien food. But Lyra had spent her whole life following rules, and where had it gotten her? Lying in a bed, waiting to die. "Why do you eat here?" she asked. "In this corridor?" Jinho considered the question. "Because my room is small and lonely, and because food tastes better when you eat it somewhere that feels important." "This corridor is important." "No, but you are important, and you are here." Lyra blinked. No one had ever spoken to her this way, direct, honest, without fear or flattery. "You knew I was behind that door." "I hoped." Jinho set down his container. "I heard that you have not been eating. I thought maybe you were lonely too." The word hit Lyra like a physical blow. Lonely. She had never used that word to describe herself. She was a princess. She was surrounded by servants and guards and advisors at all times. How could she be lonely? But as soon as Jinho said it, she knew it was true. She had been lonely her entire life. Surrounded by people, but connected to none of them. Fed the finest nectar in the empire, but starving for something she could not name. "What does it taste like?" she asked, looking at his food. "Your rice dish." "Like home," Jinho said softly. "Like my grandmother singing in the kitchen, like my mother's hands, like every good memory I have ever had." "Food cannot taste like memories." "For humans it can." Jinho looked at her with kind eyes. "Every dish carries the story of who made it and why. When I eat this rice, I am eating my grandmother's love. That is what makes it taste good." Lyra was quiet for a long time. Then she asked very softly, "Orani nectar has no stories. It is just nutrition. Maybe that is why it tastes like nothing to me." Jinho nodded slowly. "Maybe." In the distance they heard footsteps, guards making their rounds. Jinho quickly packed up his container and stood. "I have to go," he said, "but I will leave this for you." He pulled something from his pocket, a small wrapped package barely bigger than his fist. "It is called kimbap, rice and vegetables wrapped in seaweed, nothing fancy, but it has a story too. My grandmother made it for me when I was sick as a child. She said it would make me strong." He placed the package on the floor near Lyra's feet and bowed once more. Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the corridor like he had never been there at all. Lyra sat alone, holding the small package in her hands. It was warm from being in Jinho's pocket. It smelled strange and wonderful and terrifying. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than emptiness. She felt curious. Lyra held the small package for a long time after the human left. She sat in the corridor, her back against the wall, turning it over in her hands. The wrapping was simple paper, slightly crumpled from being carried in a pocket. It felt strange against her fingers. Orani food came in perfect containers, sealed and sterile. This was something entirely different. She brought it close to her face and breathed in. The smell hit her immediately, complex and layered. Salt, something green and earthy, a faint sweetness, and underneath it all, something warm that she could not identify. Her stomach made a sound. It had been silent for so long that Lyra had almost forgotten it could make any sound at all. But now it was speaking, demanding, alive. Slowly, with trembling hands, she unwrapped the package. Inside was a roll of rice wrapped in dark green paper. It was cut into round pieces, revealing a colorful center of vegetables and something yellow. It looked nothing like Orani food. It was messy and imperfect, the pieces slightly uneven. One of them had a small crack along the edge. Lyra picked up a piece and looked at it closely. She could see the individual grains of rice, pressed together but still distinct. The vegetables inside were orange and green and white. The yellow thing, she guessed, was some kind of egg. She thought about what the human had said. That food could taste like memories. That this simple roll carried the story of his grandmother, his childhood, his home. It seemed impossible. It was just dead matter, just molecules arranged in a certain way. How could molecules carry stories? But the Orani had never been able to explain why nectar tasted like nothing to her. They had run every test, adjusted every formula, and still her mouth rejected it. Maybe they were looking at the problem wrong. Maybe the problem was not in her mouth at all. Lyra took a bite. The taste exploded across her tongue, salt and savory and a hint of sweetness from the rice. The vegetables were crisp, adding texture that she had never experienced before. The egg was rich and smooth. And the seaweed, the dark paper that wrapped it all together, had a taste like the ocean, like something ancient and deep. She chewed slowly, letting every flavor register. This was not efficient nutrition delivered directly to her cells. This was an experience, a story being told through taste. She took another bite, and another. Before she knew it, the entire roll was gone. Lyra sat in the empty corridor, the crumpled paper in her lap, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt full. Not just physically full, though that was part of it. She felt full in a deeper way, in a place that nectar had never been able to reach. It was as if the food had filled a hole she did not know she had. She began to cry. The tears surprised her. Orani did not cry easily. Their bodies conserved water with perfect efficiency. But the tears came anyway, sliding down her gray cheeks and dripping onto the floor. She did not know why she was crying. Relief, maybe, or grief for all the years she had spent feeling empty without understanding why. When the tears stopped, she wiped her face and stood up. Her legs felt stronger than they had in days. The golden markings on her arms, faded to gray for so long, had a faint shimmer to them. She went back to her room and lay down on her bed. For the first time in weeks, she fell into a deep, restful sleep. The next morning, Jinho was in the middle of cleaning a hallway on the lower levels when two Orani guards appeared. They were tall and armored, their faces hard. One of them grabbed Jinho by the arm without a word. "What is this?" Jinho asked, keeping his voice calm. "I have done nothing wrong." "Silence, human," the guard said. "You are summoned by the queen." Jinho's heart began to beat faster, but he did not let his fear show. He had survived worse than this. He had survived the war, the refugee camps, the long years of loneliness. He could survive an angry queen. They took him through corridors he had never seen before, each one grander than the last. The walls were decorated with beautiful patterns that glowed softly. The floors were polished to a mirror shine, and everywhere there were guards watching with cold eyes. Finally, they reached the throne room. Queen Vela sat on a raised platform looking down at the space below. Her face was unreadable, a mask of perfect composure. But Jinho noticed that her hands, resting on the arms of her throne, were gripping tightly. Beside her stood High Physician Torek, his expression twisted with anger. "This is the human," Torek said, pointing at Jinho. "This is the creature who contaminated the princess with his primitive food." Jinho bowed low, saying nothing. "Speak human," the queen commanded. "What did you give my daughter?" Jinho straightened and met the queen's eyes. He knew he should look away, should show fear and submission, but something in him refused. "Food, your majesty," he said simply. "Rice and vegetables wrapped in seaweed, nothing more." "Lies," Torek spat. "There must have been something else, some chemical, some drug. Orani biology does not respond to human food. It is nutritionally incompatible." "I put nothing in the food except the food itself," Jinho said. "I am a janitor, not a scientist. I do not know anything about Orani biology." "Then why did you approach the princess?" the queen asked. Her voice was cold, but Jinho heard something underneath it. Curiosity, maybe, or hope. "Because I heard she was not eating," Jinho answered honestly. "And I know what it is like to lose the desire to eat. After my family died, after my home was destroyed, there were times when food meant nothing to me. I thought maybe the princess was feeling something similar." Torek laughed harshly. "You compare yourself to royalty, a human comparing himself to the heir of the Orani Empire. This is beyond arrogance." "Hunger does not care about titles," Jinho said quietly. "Pain does not care about power. These things are the same for everyone, whether they are a queen or a janitor." The throne room fell silent. Even the guards seemed frozen, unsure how to react to a human who spoke so directly to their rulers. Then a door at the side of the room opened, and Princess Lyra walked in. She looked different than she had the night before. Her skin had regained some of its silver color. Her golden markings, while still faint, were visible again, and her eyes, which had been empty and dull, now held a spark of life. "Mother," she said, her voice clear, "do not punish this human." The queen rose from her throne, her composure cracking for just a moment. "Lyra, you are walking, you are speaking." "I am better." Lyra walked to stand beside Jinho, and the act of a princess standing next to a janitor seemed to shock the entire room. "This human did what none of your physicians could do. He fed me." "That is impossible," Torek insisted. "Orani cannot survive on human food. It does not contain the proper nutrients." "Maybe I do not need proper nutrients." Lyra turned to face the physician, and there was steel in her voice. "Maybe I need something else, something you never thought to give me." "And what is that?" Torek demanded. Lyra looked at Jinho, and a small smile crossed her face. "He says that human food carries stories, memories, love. I do not understand how that works, but I know that when I ate his food, I felt something I have never felt before. I felt like someone cared whether I lived or died." The words hung in the air like a blade. Queen Vela stood very still. Her face remained composed, but Jinho saw something break behind her eyes. The cold mask of the ruler cracking just for a moment to reveal the mother underneath. "I care," the queen said softly. "I have always cared." "I know, mother." Lyra's voice was gentle. "But caring and showing care are different things. You gave me nectar because that is what Orani children eat. You gave me orders because that is how Orani mothers raise their children. But you never gave me a piece of yourself. You never showed me that my existence brought you joy." The queen had no answer to this. For 600 years, she had ruled with logic and strength. No one had ever told her that those things were not enough. Jinho stood silently, feeling like he was witnessing something private. A conversation between mother and daughter that was long overdue. He wished he could disappear, but the guards still had their eyes on him. Finally, the queen spoke again. Her voice was different now, softer, more human in a strange way. "What do you want me to do, daughter?" Lyra pointed at Jinho. "Let him cook for me. Let him make more of his human food. I do not know if it will save me, but it is the only thing that has given me hope in a very long time." Torek started to protest, but the queen raised her hand for silence. "Very well," she said. "The human will prepare food for the princess, under supervision, of course." Jinho bowed low. "Thank you, your majesty." "Do not thank me yet, human." The queen looked at him with eyes that held both warning and desperate hope. "If my daughter improves, you will be rewarded. If she does not, if you have harmed her in any way, there is no corner of the galaxy where you can hide from my wrath." Jinho nodded. "I understand." As the guards led him away to be given his new assignment, Jinho allowed himself one small smile. He had walked into the throne room expecting death. He was walking out with a chance to save a life. His grandmother would have been proud. The kitchen they gave Jinho was larger than his entire living quarters. It had shining metal surfaces, strange machines he did not recognize, and a view of the stars through a wide window. It was beautiful and cold and completely empty of anything useful. "Where are the ingredients?" Jinho asked the Orani servant who had brought him here. The servant looked confused. "Ingredients? Food, raw materials, things I can cook with." "I do not understand. Orani food is synthesized. We do not use raw materials." Jinho sighed. This was going to be more difficult than he had thought. He spent the next several hours making a list of what he needed: rice, vegetables, eggs, oils, spices. Simple things that humans had been eating for thousands of years. The station had a small human supply depot, but it was meant for the lowest workers and had very limited options. Jinho would have to be creative. Kang Sora helped him gather what she could. She raided the medical supplies for nutritional supplements that might substitute for things he could not find. She traded favors with other human workers for packets of dried food and preserved vegetables. She even found a small container of real sesame oil, hidden away in someone's private stash. "You are taking a big risk," Sora said as she watched Jinho organize his ingredients. "If this does not work, the queen will destroy you." "I know." "Then why are you doing it?" Jinho paused, holding a bag of rice in his hands. "Because someone should, because she is suffering and I might be able to help. Is that not enough?" Sora shook her head slowly. "Humans are strange creatures." "Yes," Jinho agreed, "we are." His first meal for the princess was simple: soft tofu stew with vegetables, the kind of food his mother made when he was sick as a child. It was warm and comforting, easy to digest, and filled with flavors that built gently on each other. He brought it to Lyra's room himself, carrying the pot carefully on a tray. 2 guards followed him, watching his every move. High Physician Torek had insisted on being present as well, his scanner ready to analyze every bite the princess took. Lyra was sitting up in bed, looking better than she had yesterday but still weak. Her eyes lit up when she saw Jinho, and something in his chest warmed at the sight. "What have you made?" she asked, leaning forward to smell the steam rising from the pot. "Tofu stew." Jinho set the tray down and began ladling the stew into a bowl. "Tofu is made from beans, very soft, very mild. My mother always said it was good for rebuilding strength." Lyra took the bowl in her hands and breathed in deeply. The smell was different from the kimbap, more savory and less complex, but equally inviting. She took a small spoonful and tasted it. "It is good," she said softly. "Warm." "Warm is important," Jinho said. "Warm food tells your body that someone cared enough to heat it for you. Cold food is just fuel. Warm food is a gift." Torek made a noise of disgust. "This is nonsense. Food temperature has no effect on emotional response." "Then why do bobbies calm down when they drink warm milk?" Jinho asked mildly. "Why do sick people feel better after hot soup? Maybe it is nonsense. Or maybe your science has not figured out how to measure it yet." Torek had no response to this. He simply stood in the corner, his scanner humming, his face twisted with resentment. Lyra ate the entire bowl of stew, then she asked for more. Over the next several days, Jinho prepared meal after meal for the princess. He made rice porridge with vegetables. He made egg soup with green onions. He made grilled fish, the best he could manage with the synthetic protein available on the station. Each dish was simple, but each dish was made with care. And with each meal, he told Lyra stories. He told her about Earth, about the green mountains and blue oceans and cities that stretched toward the sky. He told her about the war that had destroyed so much of it, about the refugees who had scattered across the galaxy looking for new homes. He told her about his grandmother, who had taught him that food was love, and his mother, who had never said "I love you" but had said it through every meal she made. Lyra listened to every word. She asked questions about human customs, about families and traditions, and the strange way humans attached meaning to everyday things. She learned about birthdays and holidays, about the meals that marked important moments in human lives. "We do not have anything like this," she said one afternoon after finishing a bowl of sweet rice cakes. "Orani mark time differently. We have ceremonies and rituals, but they are formal, impersonal. No one makes special food for them." "That sounds lonely," Jinho said. "I did not think so before. I thought it was simply efficient." Lyra looked down at the empty bowl. "Now I am not sure." By the end of the week, Lyra's condition had improved dramatically. Her skin had regained its full silver color. Her golden markings glowed brightly again, sometimes pulsing with light when she laughed at one of Jinho's stories. She was walking freely, eating regularly, and showing none of the signs of the fatting that had terrified the court. Torek was furious, but he could not deny the results. He ran test after test, analyzing every molecule of the food Jinho prepared, examining every cell in Lyra's body. Finally, he presented his findings to the queen. "It makes no sense," he admitted, his voice bitter. "The human food does not contain the nutritional compounds Orani require. By all logic, it should be doing nothing for her." "And yet she is recovering," the queen said. "Yes," Torek hesitated, then continued. "I have found one anomaly that may explain part of it. The princess has a genetic variation that affects her response to nectar. The chemical signals that trigger satisfaction and pleasure do not function properly in her system. She has been eating her whole life, but her brain has never registered the experience of eating." The queen's eyes narrowed. "You mean she has never felt satisfied by food?" "Exactly. Human food does not rely on those specific chemical signals. It uses different compounds, different pathways. For some reason, these are working where our nectar failed. Then the solution is simple. We will synthesize human food compounds and add them to her nectar." Torek shook his head. "I tried that. It does not work. There is something else happening that I cannot measure, something beyond chemistry." In a small room near the kitchen, Kang Sora had been observing Lyra during her meals with Jinho. She was a medic, trained to watch for signs of physical and mental health, and she had noticed something that Torek's scanners could not detect. "When Jinho tells her stories," Sora reported to the queen, "the princess's neural activity changes. The parts of her brain associated with social bonding and emotional connection become highly active. It is the same pattern we see in humans when they share meaningful experiences with others." "What are you saying?" the queen asked. "I am saying that the food may be important, but it is not just the food. It is the connection. The human does not just feed her body, he feeds her soul." Sora hesitated, then added, "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but I do not think Orani medicine has ever studied the soul." Queen Vela sat in silence for a long time after Sora left. She thought about her daughter, about all the years she had provided for her without ever truly connecting with her. She thought about the human janitor, who had nothing to offer except simple food and simpler stories, and yet had accomplished what an empire could not. That night, she visited the kitchen. Jinho was alone, cleaning up after the evening meal. He turned when he heard the door open, and his eyes went wide when he saw the queen standing there without guards, without ceremony, just a mother who looked very tired. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing quickly. "Tell me, human." The queen walked slowly through the kitchen, looking at the pots and pans, the small containers of spices, the humble tools of his trade. "Why do you do this? Why do you care about my daughter?" Jinho considered the question carefully before answering. "Because I know what it is like to feel empty, and I know that sometimes the smallest things can fill that emptiness when nothing else can. A bowl of soup, a shared meal, a story about home. But you are not her family. You have no connection to her." "Connection is made, Your Majesty. It does not come from blood or titles, it comes from care." Jinho met her eyes. "I care about your daughter because she is suffering and I can help. That is all the connection I need." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she asked a question that surprised them both. "Can you teach me?" Jinho blinked. "Teach you what?" "To cook, to make food the way you do, with stories, with meaning." The queen's voice was soft, uncertain, so different from her usual commanding tone. "I want to feed my daughter myself. I want to give her something that no servant or physician can give, but I do not know how." Jinho smiled slowly. It was perhaps the first genuine smile he had shown since coming to this station. "I would be honored, Your Majesty." And so, in a small kitchen on a space station far from Earth, a human janitor began teaching an alien queen how to make rice porridge. It was not a lesson in cooking. It was a lesson in love. The morning light on Velar 9 was artificial, but the kitchen was warm. Steam rose from a pot on the heating element, carrying the smell of rice and ginger and something sweet. Queen Vela stood at the counter, her tall form bent over the stove, her hands carefully stirring the contents of the pot. She had never used her hands for work like this before. For 600 years, servants had done everything for her. But now, as she felt the weight of the wooden spoon in her grip, she understood something that no amount of power had ever taught her. There was satisfaction in simple work. There was meaning in making something with your own hands. Jinho watched from nearby, ready to help if needed, but letting the queen do most of the work herself. She was a quick learner, he had discovered. Behind the cold mask of the ruler was a sharp mind that absorbed information like water into sand. "The porridge is ready," the queen said, her voice holding a hint of uncertainty. "Is it correct?" Jinho took a small taste. The porridge was warm and comforting, the rice soft, the ginger adding a gentle bite. It was not perfect, but it was good. More importantly, it was made with care. "It is very good, Your Majesty." The queen allowed herself a small smile, the first Jinho had ever seen on her face. "Then let us bring it to my daughter." They walked together through the corridors, the queen carrying the pot herself despite the shocked looks from servants and guards. It was a sight that would be whispered about for years. The ruler of the Orani Empire, carrying food like a common servant. Lyra was in her room, sitting by the window and watching the stars. She turned when the door opened, expecting Jinho with his morning meal. Instead, she saw her mother. "Mother," Lyra's eyes went to the pot in the queen's hands. "What are you doing?" "I made you breakfast." The queen's voice was hesitant, unsure. These were not words she had ever spoken before. "The human showed me how." She set the pot down and ladled the porridge into a bowl, just as Jinho had taught her. Her movements were careful, almost nervous. When she handed the bowl to her daughter, her hands trembled slightly. Lyra took the bowl and looked down at the contents. Then she looked up at her mother with eyes that glistened with tears. "You made this for me?" "Yes." "Why?" The queen sat down beside her daughter, something she had not done since Lyra was very young. "Because I should have done this long ago. Because I spent centuries giving you everything except the one thing that mattered. Because I love you and I never learned how to show it." The words hung in the air. Simple words, the kind of words that humans said every day without thinking, but for an Orani queen they were almost revolutionary. Lyra began to cry, not from sadness, but from a joy so deep it had no other way to express itself. She reached out and took her mother's hand, holding it tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "thank you." They sat together while Lyra ate the porridge. The queen asked about the taste, worried that she had made mistakes. Lyra assured her it was wonderful, and somehow, even though Jinho's porridge might have been technically better, the queen's porridge tasted like something more. It tasted like a mother's love, finally given form. Jinho watched from the doorway, then quietly stepped back and closed the door. This was a moment for family, not for him. He walked back to the kitchen, feeling lighter than he had in years. Over the following weeks, life on the station changed in ways no one could have predicted. The negotiations between the Orani Empire and other galactic powers resumed, but the Queen approached them differently now. She was still strong, still commanding, but there was a warmth in her manner that had not been there before. Diplomats who had expected cold logic found themselves facing something more complex, something almost human. Princess Lyra grew stronger every day. She still ate human food, though the station's cooks had begun learning to prepare it properly. She also started eating modified versions of Orani nectar that Torek had reluctantly developed, designed to trigger the same emotional responses that human food provided. She was healthy again, perhaps healthier than she had ever been. But more importantly, she was happy. She spent time with her mother now, real time where they talked and shared meals and learned about each other. She made friends among the station's staff, something unheard of for an Orani princess. She even convinced her mother to allow more humans onto the station, arguing that their unusual perspective might benefit the Empire. Jinho continued working in the kitchen, but his status had changed. He was no longer a janitor. The Queen had appointed him as the first human cultural liaison to the Orani Empire, a title that he still did not fully understand. His job, as far as he could tell, was to help aliens understand what made humans different, to show them that intelligence and power were not the only things that mattered. He started by teaching cooking classes. Orani diplomats, scientists, and nobles sat in his kitchen and learned to make simple human dishes. They struggled with the unfamiliar techniques, burned rice and oversalted soup, but slowly they began to understand. Food was not just fuel. It was connection. It was care. It was a way of saying things that words could not express. One evening, as the station's lights shifted to their night setting, Jinho received a visitor in his kitchen. Queen Vela stood in the doorway, looking less like a ruler and more like an old friend. "I have a gift for you," she said, and handed him a small box. Jinho opened it to find a document with the official seal of the Orani Empire. He read it slowly, his eyes widening. "This is a grant of citizenship," the Queen said. "Full citizenship in the Orani Empire with all rights and privileges. It is the first time such a thing has ever been given to a human." Jinho did not know what to say. He had spent years being invisible, being less than nothing in the eyes of the galaxy, and now an empire was claiming him as one of their own. "I do not know if I deserve this," he finally said. "You saved my daughter's life." The Queen's voice was firm. "More than that, you taught me how to be a mother. You reminded me that all the power in the galaxy means nothing if we forget how to care for each other. How could you not deserve this?" Jinho bowed low, the document pressed against his chest. "Thank you, Your Majesty." "There is more," the Queen smiled slightly. "In 2 months we will announce a new policy. Humanity will be given a formal seat at the diplomatic table. They will no longer be considered a lesser species. They will be recognized as equals." Jinho looked up sharply. "Equals, the other empires will never accept that. They will accept what we tell them to accept. The Orani have enough power to make it so." The Queen's eyes gleamed. "Besides, I have learned something important from you. Strength is not only measured in fleets and armies. Sometimes, the strongest thing is a simple meal shared between strangers. After the queen left, Jinho sat alone in his kitchen for a long time. Through the window, he could see the endless stars stretching into infinity. Somewhere out there was Earth, or what remained of it. His grandmother was gone. His mother was gone. His old life was gone. But maybe that was okay. Maybe endings were not always bad. Maybe they made room for new beginnings. He thought about his grandmother's words spoken so many years ago. Food is the most important thing in the universe. Not money, not power, not fame. Food. Because food is love made visible. He had not understood her then. But now, sitting in a kitchen on a space station far from home, surrounded by aliens who had once looked down on him, he finally understood. Love was the most powerful force in the universe. Not the romantic love of stories, but the simple love of one being caring for another. The love of a mother making breakfast for her child. The love of a stranger offering food to someone in need. The love that said, without words, "You matter to me." Humans had always known this. It was built into their culture, their traditions, their very souls. It was why they shared meals and told stories and cried at sad movies. It was why they fought so hard to survive, even when survival seemed impossible. And now, because of a simple bowl of rice, the galaxy was beginning to understand it too. Jinho smiled and stood up. He had work to do. Tomorrow he would teach another cooking class. He would show another group of aliens how to make food that carried meaning. He would change the galaxy, one meal at a time. His grandmother would have been proud. In her room, Princess Lyra sat by her window, looking out at the same stars. She was eating a small bowl of rice cakes that her mother had made for her. Each bite tasted like love. She thought about the human janitor who had changed everything. He had given her food when she was starving and stories when she was empty. He had shown her that there was more to life than duty and protocol. He had saved her life without asking for anything in return. And more than that, he had given her back her mother. Lyra smiled and took another bite. The rice cakes were not as good as Jinho's, but they were made by her mother's hands. That made them perfect. Outside the window, the stars continued their eternal dance. Empires rose and fell. Species evolved and died. The universe moved on as it always did. But in a small kitchen on a space station called Velar 9, a human with a wooden spoon was changing history. One meal at a time,